Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone. It is the Tuesday, April 28, 2026 episode of the Marco Jure Show. Thank you for tuning in here. Today's groundbreaking news right here in America and across the board, where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Let's begin the best of radio, informative, uncensored, unapologetic, and ready to go. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got such great topics for you today. I know you're going to enjoy each and every one of them. As always, again, I have a nice eclectic style of articles for us to delve into. We're going to be talking about how Palantir is now going to be taking over. Well, not taking over, but getting heavily involved inside the Department of Agriculture. Can you believe that? Big tech meets big agra. There we go. We've also got Ron DeSantis talking about redistricting inside of Florida. That's getting a lot of headwind as always. And, we've got to talk about the wealth tax out of California. Who's behind it? Who wants it? Who doesn't want it? You'll enjoy that one very much, I believe. And, we've also got to talk about Ray Dalio. He's talking about what I've been saying for quite some time now. Where is the economy headed in this country? Are we headed for good times or bad times? I think he agrees with my take on this. But first things first, I want to talk about what took place just recently. Of course, we know what took place on Saturday with the White House Correspondents' Dinner, the now third assassination attempt on President Trump's life. And we talked about Secret Service and how I felt that they were very much incompetent about what took place, the delayed time of getting him off the stage, the lack of creating an outer perimeter to this area where there was lots of very important people inside the government. And, I refrained from talking about this yesterday. I don't like to get involved with, what Hollywood says about President Trump and this and that. But what I saw this morning out of this USA Today article, I can't even believe some of these things that these people talk about. Every time they make these jokes about violence and this and that, then they always try to retract it, say they never want to talk about these things. But listen to what Jimmy Kimmel said. He said this on April 23rd in an episode of his late night show that people are no longer watching. Here's what he said. During the monologue, Kimmel made a joke suggesting that the First Lady, Melania Trump, would be happy about the president's death. He went on to say, "Mrs. Trump, you have a glow like an expected widow." Now, who says these things about people? What if somebody said that about his wife? And then they always try to double down on it and backtrack. Violence is never the answer. Obama just said that the other day. Violence never. Then why is your party constantly the party that is always talking about violence? This is hateful and violent rhetoric directed right towards the President of the United States, folks. Now, if you want to make quips about Donald Trump, criticize Donald Trump, critique his foreign policy, his domestic policy, fine, that's fine. We all do that. But the idea that you're joking about someone dying, I don't understand why that's funny to people. As if that's something that it should be taken lightly in this country. But again, I would ask Jimmy Kimmel. If somebody was saying that to your wife or making a joke about, Jimmy Kimmel's wife would like this if you were dead, that's not funny. That's sick. They bring up the macabre all the time, these people, talking about violence. And then when something bad happens, they say, well, you know what, we don't condone that. Yes, you do. That's all you talk about. I can point to Democrats constantly talking about going out and acting it with violence towards Republicans. We've seen this time and time again. I don't think I need to play you the montage of that. We've all heard it. This has got to stop. And now ABC is in this position now. President Trump is calling for his firing, which, again, I think that should be up to his employer. But why are we allowing this to always take place now? This goes, especially in today's era, this goes well beyond making a little joke about something or making a joke about somebody's age. This is talking about actually being pleased with somebody dying. Again, it's just sickening to me. Again, the sitting president of the United States, people are making these comments. It's unbelievable. Really, it is. Now, do I think anything's going to happen to Kimmel? Probably not. Probably not. I don't think he'll go the way of his buddy Stephen Colbert, who's on his way out. I think next month, by the way. I think he's all done. Thank God for that. But again, these shows are getting all-time low ratings. This is, again, they're not good ratings. And again, Jimmy Kimmel's the same guy who went out and made jokes about Charlie Kirk right after his death. I mean, this is sick. And this is on mainstream television. Supposedly a comedic show. I don't get it. This guy doesn't make people laugh anymore, does he? Does anyone really laugh about this kind of stuff? I think how that's good to talk about these things? So anyways, Melania Trump also took to X too after hearing this, says, Kimmel's hateful and violent rhetoric is intended to divide our country. His monologue about my family isn't comedy. His words are corrosive and deepens the political sickness within America. People like Kimmel shouldn't have the opportunity to enter our homes each evening to spread hate. She continued, a coward, Kimmel hides behind ABC because he knows the network will keep running cover to protect him. Enough is enough. It's time for ABC to take a stand. How many times will ABC's leadership enable Kimmel's atrocious behavior at the expense of our community? She's not wrong about this. She's not wrong about this at all. To joke about killing the president or the president dying, to joke about Charlie Kirk dying, to talk about all these things, it's just not funny, especially in this political climate. I think everybody could agree with that. We've heard it from Maxine, we've heard it from all these people, Chuck Schumer, all these people talking about violence. Why are they always talking about violence? And then they're the first ones, when something bad happens, say, well, violence really isn't the take on this. We don't condone this. When the entire time, again, Hollywood too, Jimmy Kimmel's not alone. You had Johnny Depp right when President Trump was elected. When was the last time someone assassinated a U.S. president? You're talking about Madonna blowing up the White House. I mean, this is sick. And there are people that are crazy out there that buy this nonsense. We're in strange times, folks. We really are. And I would like to see the Secret Service really get their act together, really start to, again, ensure safety, especially when the president is in public places like the Washington Hilton. It was not secured on Saturday evening, which allowed this would-be assassin to get close to the reception center where this event was taking place. This has got to stop. It's not funny to joke about death. It's not funny to joke about killing people or hurting people or going out and committing violence. None of this is okay. And this is not something to take lightly. It's not a light roast. And this has got to stop. It really and truly has to stop. That's all I have to say about this guy. I don't watch his show. I never watched his show. I don't find this funny. There's a time and a place for joking. But this is not something, especially when you're talking about the President of the United States, the current president, talking about dying and death. Again, to me, it's just distasteful. Again, this is going to rest on ABC's leadership. Do I think they're going to do anything about it? Absolutely not. They would have done something about it before when they got backlash because of what he said about Charlie Kirk. Now he gets up there with the fake tears, the crocodile tears. Oh, I never meant to say this. I mean, this guy cries more than he makes people laugh. I mean, it's disgusting. Really, it is. And this is why they're losing money, too. So, again, I don't know anybody that watches Jimmy Kimmel. Maybe you do. God bless you if you do. All right. Meanwhile, let's talk about what's taking place in Iran. We got to talk about this today. Very, very important stuff happening right now. We've got to talk about this possible brokerage of a deal right now. And again, I pray that this war comes to an end sooner rather than later because the economy is taking a big hit. There's people's lives who are suffering as a result of this. But the United States showed little immediate enthusiasm for this new Iranian proposal. This is out of NBC News. That would end the war and reopen the Strait of Hormuz without resolving the impasse of the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. Okay, so first things first. We got to understand some things here. Number one, the Iranians are in the driver's seat right now. I mean, you could like that, you could not like that, doesn't matter to me. That's the truth of the matter. If the Iranians were the ones that were desperate, wanting to come to the table for a deal, they would be doing that already. but they are not. That's what we need to understand here. And by the way, President Trump says that Iran, yet he never makes any mention of who he's speaking to inside the government. But he said he's speaking with somebody in the government, and they have informed him that the government is in a state of collapse, and they are figuring out their leadership situation. I don't buy this for a second. We've heard this time and time again from him. He doesn't know who he's negotiating with. He doesn't know who to talk to because the government is so deeply destroyed because of the attacks we've pushed on them. Again, I can't find any evidence for this whatsoever. Who in the Iranian government is saying they're on the brink of collapse? And if so, why are they not coming to the table then? Obviously, if their government is collapsing from within, you'd see a lot more strife, I believe, especially inside the government right now. We're not seeing that. You're seeing a very content, you're seeing a very calculated Iranian leadership. Again, you have Arachi that just went to St. Petersburg on Sunday. He was just in Pakistan, going to Oman. So they're going and they're talking to different people about what they want. But their position has not yet changed. Now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Monday, after he discussed this with President Trump and the national security team, and he said this. I got to play this for you. This was him talking, I think it was, I forget which news outlet he's speaking with. But take a listen to what he actually has to say about the Iranians right now.
On Saturday, the president canceled the talks in Islamabad, Pakistan, keeping Special Envoys Kushner and Witkoff here in the United States. He said just 10 minutes later, the Iranians made a new offer on paper, and it was better.
If what they mean by opening the straits is, yes, the straits are opened as long as you coordinate with Iran, get our permission, or we'll blow you up, and you pay us, that's not opening the straits. Those are international waterways. They cannot normalize, nor can we tolerate them trying to normalize a system in which the Iranians decide who gets to use an international waterway and how much you have to pay them to use.
Well, again, I tell you this before. They are in the driver's seat with this. Now, Washington may abandon this approach, especially with the naval blockade, which is exactly what the Iranians want. And if they could come first and foremost for peace, I think that's going to be the number one thing that the Iranians ask for. They want a peace deal brokered. And by the way, I don't just mean with a handshake or a head nod. I think they want it in actual writing. They want a truce with the United States that the U.S. and Israel are not going to attack them again. That's very crucial to their own national security. And we know that these ceasefires continually fall apart. We saw that, again, with what took place during the negotiations. They were speaking in good faith. And the United States attacked them. And again, that's not just me saying this. This is what actually took place. So I think the Iranians are going to be very calculating with how they approach this. They see that for example, the energy prices are soaring yet again. And by the way, I'm looking at the futures right now out of CNBC, and Brent crude right now is trading at $111.22, almost up 3% from yesterday's close. And we look at WTI crude trading at just under $100, $99.73 per barrel. So this is devastating. We're getting the national gas prices averaging now $4.18 early on Tuesday. You see the international benchmarks, as I just said to you, they're starting to inch their ways up. Now, the Iranian proposal would focus on really reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which President Trump wants, because he knows that his Gulf Arab partners really need this strait to be opened up. And of course, trading partners in Europe and what have you, they want this to be opened up. They want the flow of traffic so commerce can, become possible again. It's not happening. And when things are just in a standstill, it's taking hits on the economies in all the Persian Gulf nations. Now, we got to talk about how this war will end. I told you before, I think the war will end on the battlefield. I think that's the way it will end. I don't think we are done yet. I'm just going to be honest with you. I do not believe that we're not going to do anything else in this conflict. Now, maybe we get the strait opened up. Maybe we remove the blockade, but I think some fighting will continue on. I don't think President Trump is just going to simply give the Iranians everything they want, which again will be a fee to be paid for every ship that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. I don't think he's going to allow that, but I think the Iranians will stay firm on that. And I think that ultimately they're going to say that, you've got to make sure that Israel is reined in. I think that's going to be the next thing that they say. And I also think they're going to tell the Gulf Arab partners of the United States, that'd be the Emiratis, the Kuwaitis, the Bahrainis, the Qataris, the Saudi Arabians. I think what they will tell them is, listen, you're not going to build these military bases so close to Iran anymore. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to use Iraqi airspace. You're not going to use Saudi airspace. It's not going to happen. Because we were in talks with you, and all of a sudden you decided to use these bases that are very close to us to hit us. And you're not going to encroach in our waterways. And if you do that again, we'll shut down the Strait of Hormuz yet again. And good luck trying to open it up because you weren't even able to do it yourself, the United States. That's what I think their approach is going to be here. And I think President Trump has got to realize it's got to be him. It's got to be him. It can't be Steve Witkoff. It can't be Jared Kushner. They produced no peace at all. And we know that they have very close ties to Israel. I'll just tell you that. Okay, and I'll let you figure that out on your own. It's got to be President Trump that sits down with the Iranian leadership. And they broker a deal. Not Netanyahu. Although Netanyahu will be a part of it because, again, Israel is our ally in the region. But there's got to be some guarantees, I think, that the Iranians want before they come to the table and they say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We'll provide you with, obviously, the proposal that we're not going to build a nuclear bomb. And by the way, they've said this time and time again. They're not going to build a nuclear bomb. I don't think that's out of their realm for them to agree to that because they've already done it. So why wouldn't they do it again? I don't believe they'll give the United States 0% enrichment program. I do not believe that for a second. They wouldn't be that foolish, really, to say, listen, we'll put all of our trust in you that you'll give us the uranium that we need. It's not going to happen. The Iranians will say, we will have some enrichment. We're not going to completely do away with the uranium enrichment. We will move forward with that. Because, again, they're the ones winning the war. They're the ones that are in the driver's seat. And, folks, if you can't see that, I can't do anything for you. If you believe just what you hear on the television, the U.S. is winning. The Iranians are ready to collapse. They don't know who's leading the country. We've destroyed their military. We've destroyed their Navy. We've destroyed their Air Force. Okay. Then why aren't we finishing the job then? The ceasefire's over. Why aren't we finishing the job? Why, if you're winning, why would you call for another ceasefire? Why would you extend it for 2 to 3 weeks? Well, because in 2 to 3 weeks, you expect to get, obviously, your troops rested, more munitions, more aircraft carriers to the region, more time for precise action to be taken. All these things, all ceasefires are simple pauses. The Iranians don't want to pause. The Iranians are ready to go. They are winning. They were winning. They were winning on day one. I told you. The martyrdom of Ayatollah Khamenei was it. The Iranians then decided to back their government, and they've continued to back their government in greater support than even before this conflict took place. Again, you could believe me, don't believe me, but that's the truth of the matter. That's why the Iranians are on the streets every single night to protest the United States government, not the American people, but the United States government, because that's who they hate. That's who they cannot stand. They know who was backing Iraq during the Iraq-Iran war. They understand this. They know about this. They know who bombed them last June. They know all about this. They know about the crippling sanctions the U.S. puts on their government that stymies the flow of cash and what have you in the region. They understand all of this. And the idea that, they're just going to simply be okay with the U.S. government when they've seen our actions since 1979, it makes sense, folks. It really does. Obviously, let's say, for example, I'll just give you this ultimatum. Let's say, for example, let's say there was, let's say it was Spain. Spain decided to back Mexico to attack inside the United States in 1980, and we went to war with them for 8 long years, and in that process, at least 300,000 American lives were lost. And in that time, 70,000 of them were American citizens. Chemical weapons used, lots of young men killed in the combat. Many men survived these chemical wounds and what have you. How do you think the United States would feel towards Spain? You would hate Spain. You would not like Spain. And then, of course, Spain comes and says, you know what, we're going to start destroying you. We're going to put these sanctions on you. You're not going to be able to trade with anybody. Nobody's going to want to trade with you now. We'll put secondary sanctions on other countries that want to do business with you. And it's going to be devastating for your economy. It's going to be very tough to do things. And then, let's say, for example, your government is now communicating directly with Spain. And in that process, when you're working towards achieving some sort of peace ultimatum, all of a sudden this country, this Spain, this hypothetical Spain, decides to bomb the United States again. And you say, what's going on here? Why are we getting bombed again? What's going on here? Same thing here now. Same thing that just took place on February 28th. We bombed them yet again. Let's say we were bombed yet again. How would we as Americans feel about this country? We'd be very upset. We'd be saying, listen, this has been going on for quite some time now. From sanctions to war to funding proxies to killing our leader. That would upset a lot of people, I would imagine. And again, that's why you see the support in the streets. That's why you see people coming out for the National Rally Day, some 20 million, some 4 million just inside of Tehran alone, coming out in support of the Ayatollah. That's not Marco Dre saying that. That's what's actually taking place. And by the way, the recruitment levels are rising. And again, I'm not telling you that the Iranian government is the greatest government in the world. I'm not saying that at all. I'm really not. But the idea that we paint this picture of Iran, that they're just a primitive people, they're barbarians, they're the number one state-sponsored term, all that is a bunch of nonsense. All that is a bunch of garbage. It simply isn't true. And I'll refer you to the CIA's own study that came out where they were talking about, since 2000, the countries and the groups that were responsible for terrorism. Iran isn't anywhere near the top of that list. In fact, over 80% of all of the terror acts that have taken place worldwide, every single one of them, using violence for political purposes, comes from Sunni Muslim groups, which, again, the Iranians are Shia Muslim groups. These people are at odds with Iran. They're not working with Iran. They're not being funded by Iran. It's the Taliban. It's ISIS. It's Al-Qaeda. It's some of these other jihadi factions, like inside of Africa, Boko Haram. I mean, this is what's taking place. These are the groups that are responsible for this terrorism. And it's not Iran. They tell the other lie that, Israel's the only democracy in the region. That's a bunch of nonsense. Iran is a democracy. They elect their president. They elect their parliament. They elect their board of experts, or the assembly of experts. They elect their mayors. They elect their city councils. I mean, we've got to come to terms with this, folks. And the Iranian people do not hate their government. I mean, by and large. Of course, you have some people inside the government, just like here in the United States. Do you think everyone supports Donald Trump? Of course not. But because, you can pull Democrats off the street that hate President Trump, or people that act like Jimmy Kimmel. Good old Jimmy Dribble, yeah. All of a sudden now we should believe that we need to oust the President of the United States? I mean, what would we say to this if this was happening in the U.S.? If another country was acting this way towards us? We would be at odds with them. We would not like them. We would say, let's go get them. You would see protests in the streets for this. Thank God we're not at war with anybody in that way. But we need to rein it in. That's all I'm saying here. We need to understand where we are in this war. We're not winning the war. We cannot stop the Iranians from blocking the Strait of Hormuz. We would have done it by now. We would have done it by now. And as a result of that, we need to come to the table with them and say, let's work out a deal. Let's let President Trump do this. Let's let him bring J.D. Vance. He could bring Marco Rubio for all I care. I could care less. But let's broker a deal. Right? Let's stop the nonsense. It's pretty clear after 2 months now, which today is 2 months, that obviously the war is in their favor. Now, President Trump may have red lines. I understand that. With the nuclear technology, they're going to give that to you. They're not going to give you 0% enrichment anymore. Not going to happen. I don't think that was ever on the table to begin with. But I think what you'll see is a a plan very similar to what was happening last June, right before the Israelis decided to kill, what was his name? Ali Shamkhani, the head negotiator, and unfortunately was killed in the attacks by the Israelis. I think what you'll see is they'll allow us to come in and to inspect their nuclear sites. We'll be able to do that. They will swear that they're not going to build a nuclear bomb, which they've already said twice since 2003. They've sworn on that. They don't want that. We'll get that, which is good. Fantastic. Never forget, too, folks, they have already signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The only country in the region that hasn't signed that is Israel. Just keep that in mind right now. So, again, if Trump wants to create a safer Middle East, why not rein in Israel, too, then? Let's get them to sign that. Let's get them to open up their nuclear facility sites. Let's see them do that. And let's see them broker a peace deal with the Iranians if they actually want peace, which we know they don't want. And I have no joy in telling you that, but that's the truth of the matter. I mean, they're actively telling you why they want to go into Lebanon, why they want Gaza, why they want to go into Turkey now, why they want parts of Syria and Iraq and parts of Iran and parts of Pakistan and parts of Saudi Arabia and all of Jordan. And this is parts of Egypt, too. This is what they want. They want this land invasion. They want this land expansion and grab. It's called Greater Israel. Again, folks, I don't tell you what I want to tell you. I tell you what they are saying openly. And we know Naftali Bennett is one of the people that is saying this right now, that Turkey is now next on the list. It's unbelievable. It really is. But this is the truth of the matter, and Iran understands this. Iran probably is one of the few countries in the region that says, yes, we understand what's going on. We know we're on the chopping block. We know they want part of our land. They know they want to oust the way that their government operates to get the puppet president they want. And so the Western press vilifies them every step of the way. But it's not working. It's not working. I think they bit off a lot more than what they could chew. By the way, just in other news regarding Israel, President Isaac Herzog has stated that he's not going to grant a pardon to Benjamin Netanyahu in his corruption cases that always seem to get pushed back somehow. So Rubio can say that the pressure on Iran is extraordinary. Again, I don't think the Iranians are worried about it. I really don't. And they could lose 200 million, 250 million per day. Obviously, that's significant for their economy of that size. But we've also got to understand a couple other things, too. Even if we were to successfully create this naval blockade, you have to understand something. There is the Chinese-Iranian overland corridor. This is called the Belt and Road Initiative. So maybe some of you heard about it. I've talked about it sometimes in the past. This trade, this connectivity across Eurasia, from Iran going all the way to China, this bypasses all the maritime chokehold points and the sanctions, and it makes a vital route for international trade. Now, this was bombed by the Israelis. It has since been rebuilt. But understand something. There are other means to do this. There are other ways to get oil transferred, not just by sea, which, again, the bulk of it is right now, from Iran to China. They could use the Belt and Road Initiative right now. They could start going by railway to ship their goods. So that way China still has access to the necessary oil they need for their everyday procedures in their country, for their manufacturing and all that. So it's not over. It's not over for them if they stop, if the blockade was to be effective. They could still have other means in order to open up this corridor and to ship oil through rail instead of by oil tanker. So we had to put that in perspective too. Pepe Escobar did a great job talking about this transit route that most people don't talk about. It's of great strategic importance, by the way. By the way, it could also be used for other countries. They can go into India. They can go into Pakistan. They can go into these other parts of the world. But this is a very, very important Silk Road. And we should be talking about this, obviously, because the Iranians have other options. The Iranians have other ways to get oil to, for example, if they were going to sell to Russia, they could use the Caspian Sea to the north. Get oil to Russia that way, Russia can then ship that oil. So Iran's in a very particularly advantageous spot in the world, I'd have to say. They don't just have to use the Persian Gulf. They can use other means to get their goods and services out for trade. So keep that in mind, folks. When we're talking about these things, they have other options. And the Chinese are, again, talking to the Iranians. The Russians are talking to the Iranians. But obviously the Pakistanis are. But there's other means for trade for this country. And again, it highlights the economic benefits and, again, the geopolitical significance of these trade routes right now that have been put in place by the Chinese. The Chinese are very strategic, folks. Never underestimate them. Never do that because, again, they understand the significance of what Iran offers them. Again, they need the oil coming from Iran for their everyday use. It's just the way that works. Let's turn things up with another article, though, right now. Let's move on. I want to talk to you about this article out of the Daily Mail right now. And billionaire hedge fund manager Ray Dalio has a very interesting stance on what's taking place in terms of the economy. We talk about the economy in the Middle East. We say that, Iran's losing $200 to $250 million per day. We've talked about what's taking place with the Gulf Arab states right now. We have just closing the airport in Dubai cost the Emiratis some $500 million a day in capital that would be coming into the country. So it's not just Iran. It's really the Gulf Arab states themselves that are struggling right now about what's going on. That's why you see the push from them to kind of get this war to a halt. Get this over with. Let's stop this right now. But speaking in terms of the U.S. economy, Dalio told CNBC that the U.S. economy has slipped into a stagflationary environment. Now, how many times have I been telling you this? I've been telling you this for months now. But he's absolutely right about this. He shared his outlook just a few days before the government publishes its preliminary look at the U.S. economic growth for the first quarter of 2026. Economists estimate that the economy expanded by only 2.2% in the first quarter of 2026. Now, it's a bit short of our 3% GDP growth that we want to see. That's usually standard. But the economists said that's a ways away from stagflation. So stagflation is the combination, of course, of the rising prices. Think of inflation right now, which we know is going to go up. I told you this before. I told you this weeks ago. I said they're estimating 2026 to have 4.2% inflation. That's pretty high. And if this war continues to go on, it's going to get much, much higher than that. Now, pair that in with the falling economic growth inside the United States, we have what we call stagflation. Again, nothing we want. And then, by the way, I told you we have really high inflation and really low economic output. We're going to get what's called dragflation. And that's going to bring the economy right down. You add in the AI bubble bust. You add in the building bust, which is going to cause the banks to go bust. You got a problem on your hands. Again, don't say I didn't warn you, because I've been telling you this for months now, folks. And again, I always tell you the truth. I don't tell you what I want to hear. I don't want to just prop the government up. I'm not one of these people that listen to the likes of Pam Bondi testifying in front of Congress and goes, oh, well, hey, the Dow Jones never been higher. Well, again, if the government is propping up that market or propping up the AI, which is greatly affecting the top marginal stocks, of course the Dow's going to rise. But the economy is not just on Wall Street, folks. It's on Main Street as well. We look at manufacturing, we look at jobs, we look at a lot of these other things, especially with trade and with tariffs and with pricing. All these things factored in have a big effect on what's going on. Okay? Now, Dalio has said that we are certainly in a stagflationary period. That's what he's saying right now. I agree with him. Now, if you think Dalio is just saying this just to say this, you'd be mistaken, obviously. And he is somewhat correct in at least half of his take on the economy right now, that the U.S. is facing rising prices. We know this. We look at PPI numbers. We look at the CPI numbers. We look at the March inflation report just out a month earlier for this month, showing that prices rose some 3.3% in the year to March. So up sharply from the 2.4% reading from February. So we know prices are going up. We're looking at skyrocketing energy prices right now, which again are the main driver accounting for nearly 3/4 of the overall gain in inflation in March. So this isn't just, making a prediction here. We're looking at hard data. We're looking at hard data right now. We're saying, listen, the prices are going up. The economic output is going down. That means we're in stagflation. And if these energy prices go up higher than the $111 per barrel, which is what Brent crude is right now, if it goes up to $120, $130, $150, $200 a barrel, you're going to have a massive, massive problem on your hands. And right now I'm seeing some idiots on social media right now, the dunces of the world. Oh my God, we're selling oil to Japan. This is great. We're going to get so much money from this. And I say to myself, are you stupid? Are these people really this dumb? We're selling our oil to to Japan? How does that benefit you and I? You're taking away from our oil supply, folks. Now, demand isn't going down inside the United States, is it? Of course not. Of course it isn't. Prices are already elevated. So you're taking away from our oil supply, and you're giving it to some other countries. Okay, that's good for big oil. It's good for big gas. It's not good for us. If you take away those barrels of oil per day, I think they gave 900,000 barrels, if you will, give or take. That's no longer in our supply anymore. So that means, ladies and gentlemen, for those of us who are great with the economy, if you have the same demand and you lower that supply, just like what's taking place out of the Persian Gulf, when you take away 20% of that, and now that demand is still there, what happens to those prices? The prices have got to go up. So this idea that Exxon or Chevron or, ConocoPhillips or whoever it may be, it doesn't matter, is getting more money and by selling their oil to Japan now, because now the price of oil is going up per barrel once it hits the market. This is a problem. This is a very big problem for us because we don't have that oil in supply here anymore. Now that oil is going someplace else. Hey, again, it's good for Japan. They're in need of the oil. So are the Philippines. So is Australia. They're in dire straits right now because that oil is not leaving the Persian Gulf any longer. So, having said that, you got to look at where we are now. So now we're going to have gas prices go up even higher. That's what that tells me because, again, the strait is not open. And it takes a bit longer to feel what's taking place out of the Persian Gulf. I'll just put it to you that way. And by the way, it takes roughly 2 months, I believe, roughly to get that oil in supply that's coming out of the Persian Gulf. So China hasn't felt that so far yet. The Philippines, Australia, all these other countries that take this oil, they haven't really felt the brink of this yet. It's just getting started. So never forget that. Never forget that that's what's taking place right now. And then you add the effect of possibly, and by the way, Dalio talks about this, if Kevin Warsh, who will likely be the next Fed chair, is to cut interest rates, that would greatly risk damaging the confidence in the Fed right now. He said certainly you would not cut rates right now. The Fed would lose all of its credibility, particularly right now. Again, I don't think that Warsh would lower the rates just yet. I don't think so, especially in times of inflation that we're seeing right now. I don't think it's going to happen. Now, he's hinted to this. But again, we're not reaching that 2% benchmark. We're far away from it, in other words. Now, we know why Trump wants to do that. He wants, obviously, the borrowing rates to be much cheaper. People will then borrow more money in circulation, and of course, the economy starts to improve. Not going to happen, though. That's just not the way it's going to work. Like what would happen during his first term when he brought the rates down ultimately to, it was very, very low. Not going to happen right now. We're in an era right now. It's going to be very, very problematic. You also have Wall Street universally expecting the Fed to leave rates unchanged at this week's meeting and for the rest of the year. Probably, I believe that would be the case. Because, again, I don't see the inflationary numbers, at least what I'm seeing, going down anytime soon. And again, after President Trump kicked off months of economic chaos over the international trade tariffs, which again are a big problem. I've told you this before. And now, of course, you're going to take that $166 billion and he's going to give it back to companies after we paid the prices that have been risen on us. So in other words, it was a big bailout for the big businesses. They're going to get the checks in the mail after raising the prices on us, you and I, the consumer. It's amazing to me. It's amazing to me. Anyways, folks, so I'm glad to see that Dalio is getting on par with what I'm saying right now, and other people that are saying these things, the Gerald Salentis of the world, the people that are honest with you about the economy and what's going on. But that's why I read you these articles, because I want you to be prepared for this. We're not headed for good times anytime soon. The economy is not getting better. It's getting much, much worse. Again, we're not feeling the effects of it right now. We're right on the precipice of where it's taking us. And if it gets worse than in 2008, which, again, he predicted this, he said it could be something that is, this is his own words, he says, and I'm worried about something worse than a recession if this isn't handled well, which is exactly where we are headed. So my stance to President Trump, to Congress, stop the war. Stop the war right now. Meet with the Iranians, open up the strait, get a peace negotiation, raid in Israel, stop bombing them, get the hell out of there. Take a piece out of the Reagan playbook, get the hell out. There's no reason to be there. Everyone says, well, Reagan cut and run from Lebanon. Of course, we shouldn't have even been there in the first place. And we shouldn't be in the Persian Gulf right now. There's no need for any of this, folks. Let's be very, very clear about this. Now, will that happen? Only time will tell. I don't think we're done with this war. I think it's going to continue on. I've said this to you before. Everything that indicates, as I said to you before, is showing we're going to probably strike them again, and probably a lot harder at some point. So don't think we're over. Don't think that the Iranians are out of the game just yet. So I want to make that very, very clear, folks. Very, very clear. Okay, folks, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on. I had this article for us yesterday, and I want to kind of segue into this one. So I want to change gears here and move on to this article. Kind of relates to the economy as well, but it more talks about the effects of our food supply. This is out of Bloomberg. And it says here that farmers across the Great Plains are now confronting an intense drought that threatens winter wheat harvests and is pushing cattle producers towards costly feed purchases, prompting some to abandon plans to expand their herds, which, again, we know our herd size is of that of the 1950s, when the population was about half of what it is right now. Just keep that in mind as I'm talking to you about this. Now, the dryness is expected to persist through the spring after weeks of scant rainfall and a late winter heat spell that has now fueled massive pasture fires across the nation's breadbasket. Drought now covers nearly 90% of Nebraska and Oklahoma alike, with more than half of Nebraska in extreme drought. Such conditions have historically driven cattle producers to sell off animals and to force farmers to drill new irrigation wells as rivers begin to run dry. So, where does this leave us? I've talked to you about this before. I said, folks, listen, we're headed towards drought. We're headed towards record low herd sizes. But we haven't seen anything this low in quite some time. We're not getting the herds coming out of Mexico, for example, into the United States. We have farmers going out of business. We have ranchers going out of business. The coming weeks are very critical in the plains, especially for growers. And as winter wheat begins to mature ahead of the summer harvest and before other crops are planted, without sufficient moisture from the rainfall, from the irrigation, we have wheat shooting prices, again, because you're not getting it. Right, and when we add in what I've told you before, with the fertilizer, especially coming out of the Persian Gulf, 35% of the fertilizer worldwide that is used, and by the way, we get some of it, although we get most of ours from Canada, this is going to be a big problem. Without sufficient moisture from the rainfall or from irrigation, wheat shoots struggle to fill out and produce grain. That's a big problem. We need the water in the region. Now, if they use their ingenuity, if they get the irrigation, the wells, if you will, to happen, okay. But if they don't get that, we're not going to have that. And this is going to be, again, problematic. What they've said at the Department of Agriculture, ladies and gentlemen, they've said, we've got a lot of modern precedent for these rough, very rough conditions heading into the spring growing season. But this certainly ranks up there with some of the worst we've seen. So this is very problematic. We haven't gotten the rainfall we needed in a lot of these Midwestern states that produce the corn, the wheat, the barley, the soy, things of that nature. And again, it affects your feeding. When you can't feed cows corn or grain, again, I never recommend you eat cattle that's been fed that. But I'm just saying, from the conventional standpoint, that's where we get a lot of our beef from. This is how they feed a lot of our beef. They don't just feed them grass anymore, as they did in the days of the past. So we've got to understand where we are. The impact is showing already. Just 30% of U.S. winter wheat crop was rated good to excellent as of Sunday in USDA data, the lowest rate since 2023. Roughly half of the crop in Colorado, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, the region's largest producers, is categorized as poor or very poor. This is indicating high risk of yield losses. Again, I just want to tell you the truth, folks, because this is where we are right now. So these Midwestern states are struggling right now, and we need to get ahead of this. We need to do this. Now, all's not lost. All's not lost. Obviously, fertilizer prices have been soaring right now. We know this is taking place. We're seeing higher input costs, so that's going to rise the prices in general. We knew this was going to happen already. So will we have to buy wheat from someplace else? Will we have to do that? That looks to be the case. Because again, you don't have the nitrogen fertilizer that the wheat fields rely on, especially in many parts of the western United States. And of course, these western states in the Middle East. And if we don't do that, we've got to get it from somewhere else. So that means you have to import it. Well, folks, what did I just tell you? These Trump tariffs. We've got a 15% global tariff now. So everything that comes in, if we import soy, if we import corn or wheat or anything else, that's got a 15% tariff on it on top of the transportation cost, making it much higher than if you produced it here in the United States. So again, what can we say about drought? These things do happen. We've had it happen before. We need to, obviously, if we get some heavy rain, which they're not expecting will return to the central U.S. until it's, when the El Nino season comes back in late this summer, we're missing part of that planting season. So that's what I'm trying to tell you right now. So I would estimate the USDA is probably going to try to import a lot of this wheat, import a lot of this barley and grain and the soy and the corn if they're not producing what is necessary in a lot of these Midwestern states. I'll just put it to you that way. And again, the farmers they can't control the weather, right? They just can't do it. So they got to do what they can to try to get around it, try to build different irrigation if they can. But if they can't, we've got to be prepared for this. So that's why I wanted to share this article with you, because this is the realism of where we are now. So let's just be very, very clear about this. We're in 2023, 2022. This is where we are as far as crop production for winter wheat crops here in the United States. Now, I told you before, Palantir is now coming in. Just to reiterate what I've been talking about that relates to this article right now that we just talked about out of Bloomberg. This is also stirring things up right now. I just want to be very, very clear about this. They've inked a $300 million deal with the USDA to safeguard the food supply. So I was reading this and I said, what are they doing? What's going on here? Why are they receiving $300 million from the government yet again? But this isn't for farming. They're not going to be controlling anything on the farm. What this is for data infrastructure. So there's two different angles from this. There's the farmers themselves that will get faster payments, less paperwork, fewer office visits, quicker natural disaster relief. So if something goes wrong, like what we just talked about inside the Midwest. We also have better protection of one's farmland. So keep in mind, this is all electronic. Nothing is being built on these farms. They're not getting any of this money. Right? Farmers aren't getting any money from Palantir, certainly not. So that's what this is for. This is just kind of reimagining. I guess we use that word a lot, don't we? Reimagining something. They're introducing something new for farmers, how they will store information, how they will collect information, how they will get payments and whatnot. On a national security standpoint, though, the tracking of foreign farmland purchases, they want to do that here in the United States. They want to monitor adversarial influence. They want to secure USDA systems from cyber attacks or hacking, if you will, which obviously would not be good. And they will identify supply chain vulnerabilities. And again, the idea that farmers benefit from the industry is becoming a little bit stronger, though. And when we put these things into perspective, it becomes much faster. What do I mean by that? So instead of a farmer writing down, for example, putting it in the mail and then shipping it off to the federal government, now it's all done on the computer, if you will. It's all done in a database. Now, Palantir will be the beneficiary of all that. And it seems like this is the way they want things to go in the future. They want these big farmers to be very much in part of this for these things to happen. Now, we just talked about the U.S. farmers are grappling with the rising supply cost. They're getting squeezed by an ongoing trade war between the U.S. and its major trading partners. You'll remember I talked to you about what took place with China. China decided not to buy the soybeans from the United States at the same level they were prior to this, so the United States had to sell their soybeans to other countries. They were looking to Brazil, Argentina, other countries like that, so these farmers could make ends meet for the year. But it crippled the market still late last year. In December, President Trump announced a $12 billion bailout aimed at helping farmers sweep up the new trade war that we found ourselves in. Again, that was created by the government. But the rising gas prices now from the war in Iran have now amplified. We've got the rising cost of fertilizer, again, due to shipping disruptions and, of course, what's taking place. Did anyone ever know 35% of the world's fertilizer came out of the Persian Gulf? I had no idea. But all these things affect everyday farmers, even here inside the United States. And that's forced many farmers to rethink what they produce, putting supply chains at risk and what have you. So now what they want to do is they want to go digital. That's what it comes down to. They don't want to have everything on with pen and paper. They want everything to be on a database. That's the way they want to do these things. So I don't know how, again, beneficial this will be. We know, just on a side note, Palantir now has about 1,627 different contracts with the U.S. federal government right now. And among the 1,788 federal award transactions, they rake in a lot of money, folks. Get a load of this. They just received $13.7 billion in the fiscal 2025 year alone. Much of that has been utilized by the Department of Defense, DHS, the Department of Justice, Health and Human Services, and the U.S. Treasury, as well as many others. So, again, think about this. This is big tech and big agriculture merging together with the federal government, folks. Isn't that great? The PayPal mafia is alive and well. And by the way, if you were listening to yesterday's show, you heard me talking about the new technology being installed inside of the everyday passenger vehicles. These companies like JoyNext, AutoBrains get very, very wealthy off what Congress is doing, and Palantir is no different. But I just found it's very interesting to see that now they're getting their tentacles inside of big agriculture and how that works out, because then everyone's got to use that software. Everyone's got to use that data. And as a result of that, Palantir gets uber wealthy. Just thought I'd bring that up to you. Just thought you'd enjoy that, ladies and gentlemen. All right, folks, moving on. We have we got about one segment left in today's broadcast, so let's jump right into it. Let's change what we're talking about completely right now. And listen to this. This is coming out of Newsweek right now. And what does it say? Well, new Florida maps have now revealed Ron DeSantis has now said, amid Trump's redistricting war, what is going on right now inside of Florida. Well, Governor Ron DeSantis' office, ahead of the special legislative session, said he would likely create up to 4 additional GOP-leaning districts if approved by the Florida's Republican-controlled legislature. We have Republicans now currently holding 20 of the state's 28 U.S. House seats. Yep. DeSantis has now said that the proposal reflects the population shifts since the 2020 census and anticipates a U.S. Supreme Court ruling on how the race can be considered when redrawing these districts. Well. So, what do we find ourselves in? Well, As we know, the Republicans and Democrats alike are now gerrymandering the heck out of their states right now just to get an edge for the midterms. Again, no shock there. But one thing's for certain. I got to tell you this. We talk about these things for a reason. One thing is for certain right now. The immense support for President Trump that we all saw, and again, many of you listening supported President Trump back in 2024, that support is now waning. That support is no longer there. Again, the Epstein files play a big role in this. We were gaslit, being told that it was a Democratic hoax when we were promised transparency and, of course, accountability. Well, that's no more. But the problem is this. The problem isn't getting more seats. The problem is holding on to those voters. Those voters are not there anymore. And who are those voters? We've got, for example, a lot of the independents, these anti-war independents, these anti-war Democrats that came over to President Trump because he was running on a peace ticket. Kamala Harris did not do that, among other things. So, as a result of that, a lot of these people shifted over and voted for President Trump. Again, not shocking. He ran a good race. He really did. But then you saw things, for example, right? We were pitched no new wars. And now what? We've bombed Iran twice now with zero precedents. Again, no risk to national security to the United States. Now we are stuck in this war of choice. Should we not solve this very, very soon? Which, again, most Americans do not approve of this war. Again, I tell you this because it's true. Again, you see on news media, people are backing this, especially on the right. It's not true. Most Americans don't want this. Most Americans just want to watch baseball and want the economy to work for them. That's just the truth of the matter. Most people they're not worried about Iran. No one was ever worried about Iran. President Trump didn't even run on that. And now we're saying we need this war of aggression to save the United States. It's simply not true. Now, DeSantis has a different take on this. By the way, I told you I'm not terribly fond of all this. I'm really not. I'm not fond of redistricting in the middle of, the census years between 2020 and 2030. I'm not for that when we're supposed to be redrawing these maps. But I want you to hear from him first. He has a different take on this, I think. He has probably the similar take to Governor Greg Abbott of Texas. He was talking with Laura Ingraham just yesterday. Take a listen.
Well, look, that's a separate question, I think, than Florida, because this has been a long-standing issue that we've had since I've been governor. I vetoed the legislature's maps in 2022. We ended up doing a compromise map, got rid of a racially gerrymandered district in North Florida, but we still had one in Southern Florida, which I don't think is constitutional. This map removes that racial gerrymander. We are also in a situation in Florida. We've had a massive population boom. So we have congressional districts. We had District 14, for example, had about 100,000 votes less than District 12 right, next to it, because we've had growth in certain parts of the state. So I've always wanted to do this. I think the numbers justify it, but that's really independent of Virginia or any of these other things. It's the right thing to do for Florida.
So he's saying the exact same thing that Governor Abbott was saying in Texas. They've had this mass population growth since 2020. It's been unexpected. It's obviously rising in Texas and in Florida and Tennessee and other states like that. And at the behest of President Trump, he understands he's going to have a lot of trouble in these midterms. That's just the truth of the matter, folks. Okay? We can't ignore that, I don't think. Again, I don't like telling you this, but this is the truth. And again, should the Democrats win, should they get back in the House and possibly the Senate, which they are projecting right now, this could be very, very problematic for President Trump. And again, I don't say this to you just to hear myself talk, but when you're talking about invading Cuba, when you're talking about, by the way, which has never done anything in the United States, invading Colombia, Mexico, Greenland, when you're not reigning in Israel, when you're not fixing the economy, and we're talking about more wars, this becomes very, very problematic, and it's going to become much more difficult to hold on to those seats. Again, I don't tell you this because I want to. I'm telling you this because this is what's happening right now. We are losing support. We're not gaining support. That's the biggest problem with all of this. So even if we're victorious in redistricting, it's going to be a big uphill battle to get Republicans out to vote in the midterms in 2026. That'll wrap it up for today's show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. As always, share the show with others if you can. Make sure you're staying prepped with food, water, money, medicine, ammo, anything to be self-sufficient. Have a great rest of your day. I'll see you back here tomorrow for more groundbreaking news on the next Marco Dre Show. Until then, be good, stay busy, and God bless.